Still, I'm joined by Tony Gosling, who's an investigative journalist. Good to have you with us, Tony. So what's your prediction? What's going to happen?
Well, I mean, it's fascinating. It's fascinating for me to watch just how appalling the press coverage here has been on one of the main networks, the Peston programme and ITV here last night. They were saying, well, we've discovered that this election has nothing to do with Brexit. Well, I can tell you, in most voters' minds, this is uppermost because everybody wants this over and done with after the referendum result was rained back on. The polls, what they call the poll tracker, which looks at all the polls, is now putting Boris Johnson, the Conservatives, 10 points ahead of Labour and Jeremy Corbyn. It's not really that surprising because Jeremy Corbyn did not want this election. He was bounced into it by the Welsh nationalists and the Scottish nationalists getting together with the Conservatives to force it to happen. If he does form the largest party, so by some miracle, he will probably get together with the Scottish and Welsh nationalists to form a Labour coalition with them. And then we'll have another Brexit poll, so there will be the second referendum. That will be right at the end of next year. They've already said it will be after the party conference, so we're going to have at least another year of Brexit. And then also there'll be another vote on Scottish nationalism as to whether the Scots want to remain with the UK, and of course they'll probably vote the same as they did last time. So that will be another load of campaigning, which may be a complete waste of time if Labour get in. So we'll see what happens with there. I think you'll find that the policies don't matter so much as the Brexit question, and the other thing, of course, is the media coverage and the personalities. And whatever you might say about his policies, Boris Johnson is definitely scoring much higher than Jeremy Corbyn on a policy basis. One thing that people never talk about here and has not featured, it's probably useful to look at what's not been in the election campaign, is Boris's support for Israel. And so, of course, he's not against the whole policy of regime change in the Middle East, which Jeremy Corbyn very much is. So from an international point of view, it would be much better if Corbyn wins. But I'm afraid from a European nationalist and anti-EU point of view, and there's many, many people across Europe, including in Catalonia, in Greece, in Italy, in Germany, and of course the Gilets jaunes in France, that want out of the European Union. And so Britain has got to try and set the example that it is possible to do that in January.
Right. And Tony, the question is how they want it out of the EU, but how? Do we expect, because Johnson has promised, I'll get this done if I win. So can we expect a hard Brexit or what?
Well, you might call it a hard Brexit. It's not a total Brexit. So in other words, there will be a transition period. But Johnson has promised, not that we can necessarily believe what these politicians say, I'm afraid, but what he's promised is that we will be out of the customs union and out of the single market. That means also out of the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, and this is really key. So if the European Court of Justice is still in effect, as it would be if Corbyn carries on, that means that the policies that Corbyn wants to pursue, the nationalisation, for example, of water, turning that back into a public utility, the railways back into a public utility, the post office back into a public utility, the letters, etc. That may be impossible if we're still under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, because Brussels has what they call state aid laws. And those companies that now have those franchises and those businesses can sue the government. They can take them to court. So the government would have to fight a battle through the courts to allow that to happen, because they'd still be under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. That's why I think what we can be hoping for, potentially here, is that we do get a proper Brexit, and then maybe in a few years' time, somebody like Corbyn, because if Corbyn loses more than last time, he'll probably be gone forever tomorrow or over the next few days, and somebody like him will have a second chance. But really, Corbyn, I think, has blown it by making sure that he's against Brexit. The whole party now is against Brexit. They won't allow any kind of real Brexit outside the European Court of Justice if he wins. Right. And if he's blown that means that'll be the last chance or the final chance for 40 years of having some kind of real socialist government in Britain. And so if Corbyn doesn't win, then I think he's made a terrible mistake and a terrible blunder in counteracting what the people voted for in the Brexit referendum. The other thing, of course, is no mention of Julian Assange. Terrible situation. The best investigative journalist in the world has been incarcerated in Britain, and that hasn't been mentioned by either party. Disgusting, because it should be a major election issue, as should be the Middle East regime change wars. They haven't featured either in the campaign.
Yep. Okay. And as for Brexit, Tony, more than Brexit, you need an exit from Brexit, I believe. Thank you for your comments. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joined us from Bristol.